First thing I'm going to do is take some BB cream and I'm just going to apply it onto the areas of my face that need it the most and then blend it out evenly all over my face. Once I've blended out the BB cream all over my face, I'm going to apply a little bit more wherever I need it, especially on the sides of my face where I've got quite a bit of acne scarring. I'm just going to layer it a little bit more. If you've got something more severe that you want to cover up, like severe acne scarring or a birthmark, then feel free to use a concealer. You don't necessarily have to use a BB cream, it's just what I prefer to use. Since I'm going to be applying lipstick on my lips later, I'm going to apply some lippy right now, because you could apply it when you apply the lipstick, but by then it hasn't really had a chance to sink into your lips, so you want to apply it now. Next I'm going to take my favourite Graftobian concealer and I'm going to be using a shade which is slightly lighter than my skin tone. Using my ring finger, I'm just going to apply a little bit in the inner corner of the eye, seeing as I tend to get kind of bluish grey dark circles there, and then I'm also going to apply it where you would normally get dark circles. You don't have to use your fingers, and if you prefer, you can use a brush. It's just what I prefer to use because I find that the heat from my fingers makes it melt into my skin a little bit better, so I prefer to apply it close to the eyes with my fingers and then blend it out later with a brush. I also tend to get quite a bit of redness on the outer corners of the eyes, so whatever's left on my brush I'm going to apply it on the outer corner and then blend it out, and again you can use your fingers or a brush, whichever you prefer. Once I've covered up any redness or blemishes, I'm going to take the exact same shade of concealer, and starting from the middle of my eye, I'm just going to wipe a line right down my face. I'm also going to put a little bit on my chin to highlight it, and then also right down the nose, keeping it to the centre of the nose. And then finally, once we've done this, we're going to do a swipe right next to the nose and bring it right along the top of the cheekbones. Once you've marked out the areas that you want to be highlighted, you're going to blend it out. And it's very important that you blend this out perfectly, we don't want any of the lines to show. Blended out all the areas that you want highlighted, we're going to move on to getting it to melt into the skin a little bit more. Especially with heavy concealers, and this concealer is pretty heavy, they can look a bit cakey and we don't want that. So you're going to take your hands and your fingers and you're going to press it all over your face, and the heat from your hands will help it blend into the skin a little bit more, and it will also take the texture from your hand and look a little bit more real rather than just cake on your face. Now with a sleek blush in Suede, I'm going to take this and I'm just going to accentuate the jaw. And you just want to use any ordinary blush brush, but make sure you get something which is a little bit stiff. We don't want a brush which is too floppy or you're not going to be able to really blend it into the skin. For finding the hollows of the cheeks, you want to pull a bit of a fish face, and you're just going to line down the side of the face. Once you've lined out the area that you want to really firmly blend it into the skin. We don't want any harsh lines. Because this is a doll look, I'm going to be using quite a bright pink. Normally I'd avoid colours like this, but we want that very innocent pink blush. So you're going to apply it on the apples of the cheeks, and then once you've done that, you're going to blend it out in this direction, and make sure to really thoroughly blend it out. Even though it's meant to be quite a strong colour, we don't want it to look like you've been slapped. It's meant to look like you've got a really hot flush of colour. And if you've over applied a little bit, it doesn't matter. Just take your foundation brush, run it over and buff it out a little bit. I'm going to be using this palette for the eyes, and as usual I'm going to be using a primer all over the lid first before we begin, and don't use too much. And then I'm going to be using the lightest shade in the palette and applying it all over the lid. You can use a brush or your fingers, whichever one you prefer. And then I'm going to be filling in my eyebrows using the black shade. Now if you fill in your eyebrows with black, it's very important that you don't go straight from the palette and straight onto your eyebrows. Brush off any excess and then gradually build up the colour. Now taking the second darkest shade, I'm going to start in the inner corner of the eye and draw a line just above the crease and blend it upwards. One of my favourite tricks for tricky areas like this is to use a small fan brush, and taking the exact shade I was using previously, I'm going to use that to get a perfectly curved edge in the inner corner of the eye. I'm also going to use this for the outer corners of the eye, but if you don't have this brush or you're more comfortable using a different kind of brush, then just go ahead and use what you want. This is just what I personally prefer. Once you've created the curve on the outer corner, we're going to be taking a flathead shader brush and we're going to bring it right down underneath the lashes, and you want to really work it into the eyelashes. There shouldn't be any gaps between the makeup and your real eyelashes. And now with a flat shader brush, I'm just going to be blending the colours outwards. Going back to the mini fan brush, I'm just going to load it up with a black eyeshadow from the same palette I used previously. I'm going to work it into the roots of the lashes, and this is a really fantastic way to make your lashes look a lot thicker than they naturally are. And then once I've done this, I'm going to take the same black eyeshadow with a little nail art brush, and I'm going to line the eyes closely to the real lashes as I possibly can. Make sure that you don't leave any gaps between the eyeliner and your lashes. And once you've lined it really well, making sure that you haven't missed any spots, we're going to go back to the inner corner and we're going to bring the line down just a little bit. And make sure that it's lined very firmly because you do want to be able to see this clearly. Now we're going to line again in the inner corner. And don't worry if you mess up a little bit, we're going to be covering this up later. And then on the outer corner, just create a slight curve. And the easiest way to do this is to look down into a mirror, that way the folds of your eyelids don't get caught and you'll get a smooth straight line. On the lower lid we're going to create a little bit of a dip, and don't try and do this in one sweep, just do it in little strokes and bring it up into the lashes. Make sure that you line it really strongly, and then once you've lined this, we're also going to line the real lash line. Try and line it as close to the real lashes as possible, and again, like the bottom line, you want to line it really harshly. We don't want anything soft and nicely blended here. And then on the outer corner, you're just going to draw hundreds and hundreds of really tiny little wispy lashes, and you're going to bring it all the way around and connect it to the lower lid. And if you don't have any nail art brushes to use as eyeliner brushes, something else that you can use is just to go to any art craft store or art shop and get one of the small detail brushes, and you'll be able to do the same thing. And then using the same blush that we used previously, I'm going to apply it in the inner corner before applying a little bit of white eyeliner just in the centre of the waterline and also in the inner corner of the lid. And make sure to blend this out. With the same white eyeliner, I'm just going to do a few stripes in the middle of the lid before covering it with a gold shade from the same palette we're using, and we're just going to keep this to the centre of the lid to give it a highlight. Not quite finished, we still need to apply two rhinestones, a silver one which is just off centre and then a black one in the inner corner before applying mascara. But if you want to skip the mascara, feel free to do so, but it is quite important that you wear a big set of false lashes. And lastly, for the lips, I'm going to first apply a cherry red. And so we're going to take this and we're just going to apply it on the centre of the lips at first, so you want to pout your lips and then blend it out, and then taking a lip brush we're just going to focus this on the outer corners of the lips and blend it out. We don't want anything too strong. For the moment we're just giving it a little touch of colour. And lastly we're going to be finishing off with a mulberry shade, and we're going to keep this just to the centre of the lips. So you're going to start off with the Cupid's bow and make sure that you really emphasise the rise and the fall of the Cupid's bow, because we want to really exaggerate the shape of the lips and give them a doll-like look. And you're probably going to want to apply about 2 coats of this before blending it out with the fingers. And that's it, you're done!